I'm a professor at Babson. I been there for a long time, like 20 years, but I also work for big consulting firms, McKinsey, Accenture, EY, it was called Ernst& Young at the time, and taught at other schools too, Harvard Business School and University of Texas and Dartmouth Business School. Anyway, I was sort of trained as a sociologist academically, but I did a lot of work in statistical computing, and I sort of became a sociology professor for a while, but I didn't like just sitting in my office writing papers for a few other sociologists. So I got into um, how companies use information systems, and I've been doing that for quite a long time now. Uh, I think next year will be the 40th year that I've been employed at this. So it's been a very long time. So in terms of my focus, um, I don't know, I started out looking at an area that became quite popular for a while. It's not so popular now, called business process reengineering, where you kind of change the way you work to make your organization more productive. And then I moved into these big enterprise systems. People refer to them as ERP systems and how to get value from those. And then I moved into how to manage an organization's knowledge. That was called knowledge management. That was also very popular for a while, but not so much now. And then I moved into analytics and then big data and then AI, all of which are kind of related to each other. If you work with AI, you probably realize that they're all sort of cousins, if you will. So, as I say, analytics and AI are quite similar. The uh, a number of years ago, somebody told me, a guy who's written a couple of books himself. I've written 5 books on AI now, but this guy told me, "Oh, by the way, you know, machine learning and predictive analytics are the same thing." And I said, no, that can't be, because I didn't know that much about machine learning. When I was younger, working for a consulting firm in Cambridge, I'd done a lot of work in the last generation of AI, which was expert systems, these rule-based systems. But I didn't know that much about machine learning, or I didn't think I did. But I'd written several books on analytics and predictive analytics, and I said, huh, they're the same thing. So they turns out they are. So there's a close relationship. I mean, machine learning often uses more complex types of models, but it doesn't have to anyway. So um, I'd written a book on how companies succeed with analytics called Competing on Analytics. That was my biggest selling book so far. I've written 23 altogether, and that's my biggest selling. And it was, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 copies, which is a lot for me anyway. Um, for a business book, that's about as much as you get, I think. Anyway, so then companies started to move into big data. And so I wrote a book about that. And then it became clear that they were analyzing that big data with AI. So normally what I would have done is my first book on a topic is always sort of, what's the overall lay of the land and what are companies doing with it? But there was not enough happening yet in companies to write that book. So I wrote a book called Only Humans Need Apply with a co-author. And it was about this idea of augmentation. And we were arguing that augmentation was both much more likely and I think a better idea in general than large scale automation. I don't know why it came out in 2016. It didn't sell terribly well. And then I did write that sort of overall book. That was called The AI Advantage. That was probably 2019 or so. Um, then I wrote a book on AI in healthcare called Advanced Introduction to AI in Healthcare, also co-authored. Then I co-authored a book that came out last year called Working with AI, about people who work with AI on a daily basis and what that means for their job. Is like 29 case studies of people who already work with AI as sort of, a day-to-day colleague. And then the most recent book is this book, All In on AI, about companies that are really aggressive. It's kind of like that book, Competing on Analytics, that I wrote um, a number of years ago. I think it was 2007, maybe. Um, but it's about AI instead of analytics. Even though, as I say, there's a close relationship between the two. Not much doubt about that. It's generative AI right now. And I just did some every year. I do a survey of chief data and analytics officers. Those are usually the people who kind of manage analytics and AI in their organizations. It's a relatively new job, but most big companies have them now. And so we asked them. This is sponsored by Amazon Web Services, and so we asked them, what are you doing with generative AI? And um, the bad news is that only 6% said they had a production application of it. Most of the other people were experimenting either at the individual level, telling their people, do what you want with AI, with generative AI, get a Chat GPT account or use our company account and, try to write your blog post faster or whatever. Um, and about 35%, I think, were using it for departmental level experimentation. Maybe the marketing department has decided that there's something important to do. Or the customer, I think the biggest single use case we found was what people referred to as customer operations, which is, call center chatbots, basically using generative AI. Um, but so 6% production application, 31 or 32% individual experimentation, 35% um, uh, departmental experimentation, and 16% banned it because they were, I don't know, worried about some aspect of it. Maybe the most common concern is that it will um, give away intellectual property, a company's, secrets from putting prompts in that go into training the next generation of Chat GPT or whatever. But uh, I personally, it's a tough thing, generative AI. I wrote the first article in Harvard Business Review where I try to publish stuff because, executives in companies read it and other academics read it. It's one of the few places where that's true, one of the few publications. So I wrote the first article in Harvard Business Review about generative AI, but a couple of weeks after I published it, ChatGPT came out and nobody paid any attention anymore to my article. So there's just so much written about it. It's hard to figure out exactly what to do that's distinctive about it. So since I'd done work in knowledge management, I did an article also in Harvard Business Review about how companies use it to manage their own internal knowledge, get that knowledge into ChatGPT or whatever model they're using, and so that people can access it easily by just asking simple questions and prompts. And then I've done a little bit of work on using generative AI for competitive intelligence, how to find out what your competitors are doing. That's going to be in Harvard Business Review in a couple of weeks. And then a little bit about using it for coding. Obviously, a lot of companies are realizing that they can drastically improve their coding productivity. You have to think about, well, gee, is anybody going to need to code anymore? And you can just say what you want with a simple English prompt or whatever language, what does that do to coding? I did this. I do some work with Deloitte, the world's largest professional services firm. So we ask every year, or for a while we did. They they don't ask it anymore, and I told them I should keep repeating the question, but um, they don't. Um, what do you want to get out of your AI, and what benefits have you gotten already? And so you can see the upper right is the horizontal axis is benefits that companies are pursuing, and the vertical axis is the ones that have gotten an outcome already in that area. So making their business processes more efficient is number one by far on both. And that's things like, optimizing your supply chain or predicting your uh, customer demand, something like that with AI. And these are things that have been going on for a long time using analytics. So, I my own belief is that it'd be better if we try to find some new things to do with this technology. But both that one, improving decision making, that's been around for a while, enhancing your existing products and services. You really have to get down to enabling new business models, and creating new products and services. I think for something to be, really game changing, if you will, or strategic with AI. And note, reducing headcount is the lowest objective, even though a lot of reporters like to write about that. But 31% did say they've already done it to some degree. So um, it is happening. It's just not, a high level objective. Um, this is sort of how much of it companies are doing. So we sort of characterized companies in terms of how many use cases were fully deployed, AI use cases, and then which ones were they getting high levels of outcomes from. And always on these charts, you want to be in the upper right. So the transformers have 4 to 7 or more deployed use cases, and they're getting value out of a lot of them. The path seekers, fewer deployed ones, but getting a high level of outcome from what they've done. Starters, not much of any activity, and underachievers are deploying AI systems, but they're not getting a lot of value. But we found in kind of relating that to what they were trying to do with AI, yeah, high outcome companies, the path seekers and the transformers, were trying to use AI for new markets and segments, or new products and services, or creating new business models. And these were, 3 times more common in the high outcome companies than in the low outcome companies. So, my general feeling is you should try to be doing something new with this technology, not, making your existing business a little more efficient. So this is this idea of all in, of, really being aggressive with AI, with not just 4 to 7 or a little bit more, but in some cases tens or hundreds or even thousands of AI systems in production deployment. So there's some banks. Capital One, for example, has over 1,000 machine learning systems in production. Google, we're not really writing about companies like Google so much in this analysis. We're more interested in traditional companies and how they change themselves. But Google, I think, had 2,700 machine learning applications in place in 2016. So obviously a lot more now. And these companies are reimagining how they do their work, and they have a lot of people who are really knowledgeable about AI, and they have good data, lots of data to kind of train their models and so on. They're making a long-term commitment and spending lots of money. They are, worried about AI being ethical and trustworthy, so they've done something about that. And then it's clear sort of somebody's running AI for the company, and they've hired a lot of data science talent and so on. Some of those are creating new business models or products or services. Some are transforming their operations, and some are really trying to change how their customers behave. You may have heard, for example, that social media companies like Meta or um, uh, Twitter to a lesser degree have changed their customers' behaviors with AI models that basically end up polarizing customers. They only show you what you want to see, and they kind of you only end up being friends with people who are pretty much like you. And it's AI that's really contributing to that problem. But these are companies that are trying to be more positive about it by mostly creating better health behaviors, creating better driving behaviors, or whatever. There were fewer of those than the other two, though. So I don't know if you know Airbus. They're the big competitor in global airline commercial airplane services, big competitor to Boeing. And sadly, Airbus is really a European company, and Boeing, of course, is American. I'd like Boeing to be better than Airbus, but I think Airbus is well ahead of Boeing from an AI standpoint. And for example, they've created this new ecosystem they call Skywise, where they got everybody together who uses Airbus aircraft, which is 140 different airlines around the world, almost 10,000 aircraft, and they're trying to combine all that data and use it to train AI models for things like, predicting when maintenance issues are going to happen, or monitoring the overall health of the airplane, or looking at reliability analysis, or, better, more efficient global routes. And then they have a defense and space business that's quite active as well. This company, Ping An, it's the largest private sector company in China, and I think one of the most amazing companies in the world in AI. But they have this ecosystem model of a lot of, a network, if you will, of different businesses and providers that they sort of orchestrate. They started out in insurance, now they're in banking, healthcare, automobile services, and smart cities. And so they do things like using AI to, if you crash your car, you just take a picture of it. That's actually using a technology that comes out of a US company, which we also cover in this book, called CCC Intelligent Solutions. But it very quickly gives you an estimate for how much it's going to cost to fix it based on a database that it has of car damages. Ping An believes that they can figure out if you'll pay back your loans based on your facial image. In the United States, we would not allow that, and we also don't believe that it's effective, but they do. But I think the most impressive thing is now they have over 400 million patients for this kind of super health app. It's called Good Doctor, that does triage. It'll decide based on what you say your symptoms are. Do you need to come into the doctor? It will, if you are going to the doctor, it will give the doctor a preliminary diagnosis for him or her to confirm, a preliminary treatment plan, and then also figure out the best way to get you your drugs or medical devices or whatever you need for 400 million people, which is more than all the people in the US. And they do it in auto services. And they sort of had these ecosystems, and they get more and more data and makes their products more and more valuable. And the head of data science said, it's like a Disneyland of data around here. But you can see also tons of engineers and data scientists and AI specialists. So, AT&T, mostly in the mobile phone business these days, but they've decided, usually the people who create AI in companies are professionals, both AI and automation. I don't know if you're familiar with this idea of robotic process automation, but some people call it the dumbest form of AI, but it's very, very popular in companies for kind of automating information intensive tasks. I'm happy to talk about it more if you want, but so they have professional data scientists and automation people, but what they're really trying to do is democratize things. I don't know if you've heard of this term, citizen development, citizen technologies, citizen data science, etc. Anyway, these are people who aren't trained as data scientists or IT people, but they, they can figure it out on their own. So it's becoming more and more popular. It's the subject of my next book, actually, and they've made it easy for them. Data scientists often spend way too much of their time fooling around with data, and so they created this feature store with 26,000 reusable features to use in modeling. Then they have these automated machine learning tools that compete to try to find the best, algorithm to fit the data. They have an automation center of excellence, but 92% of their automation bots, over 3,000 of them, have been created by amateurs or citizens. Tons of courses, and they say they've gotten, an enormous amount of value out of this approach. So the world is moving, I think, toward more democratization of these technologies. It's an interesting question. As I say, I was into it back in the 1980s and 90s a little bit with this idea of expert systems, these rule-based systems that everybody thought were going to be very powerful. They turned out to be not that great, particularly they didn't scale very well. But I don't know. It getting into AI again was kind of a natural flow from analytics to big data to AI. I don't know. I think it's pretty amazing technology. It's pretty amazing that we have these tools that can do what only humans have been able to do in the past. It's getting a little scary now with generative AI. I sometimes say that traditional machine learning is like analytics on steroids. But generative AI is kind of like analytics on LSD. It's just very unpredictable and kind of mind-blowing in lots of ways. Not that I really know what it's like to take LSD, but that's what people say anyway. Good question. I personally do not believe that it's a sustainable career, because we're already seeing systems that will suggest prompts to you and improve your prompts and so on. So, I think many of us do need help with prompting now, and prompt engineering right now is a quite useful thing. But my guess is it won't be long at all before almost every one of these generative models will be able to, suggest a prompt or kind of take you through a question and answer process until it gets a prompt that you're really happy with. So, I think there are going to be plenty of jobs involving, creating AI, working with AI. In fact, my general belief is that the only people who will lose their jobs to AI will be people who refuse to work with AI, whether you're talking about a radiologist in healthcare or a marketer or a journalist or whatever. But I think, you've got to be open to how you can add value to these technologies and use them in your work. Yeah, good question. I mean, I think particularly with generative AI, it's easy to see how it's going to make the people who use it more productive and effective. I mean, I'm sure you see this in work as a student. Uh, you can get ideas that you probably wouldn't have come up with. You can illustrate your work with images that nobody's ever taken before. I don't know about you, but I used to steal a lot of images from Google Image, and now I generate them with Dolly 2 or Midjourney or something like that. And um, I think eventually it's going to create um, videos quite effectively. Some of my students are using it to create PowerPoints. So uh, I think it's just going to make the people who use it more productive and effective. If you're talking about traditional AI and how it makes you more uh, productive and effective, it's mostly, I think, around predicting what's going to happen. And clearly, if you have a good idea of what's going to happen in your business, you're going to be more successful than the people who don't. Um, it's interesting. I'm writing this book, as I mentioned, on kind of citizen technologies, and my um, co-author is a guy named Ian Barkin. If you're interested in um, uh, robotic process automation, he's an expert on that, and he has some really fun LinkedIn learning videos that you should check out. But uh, I generally believe that almost all of us do more than one thing in our jobs. And even if AI takes over one task, I mean, take radiologists, for example, people who do medical imaging. Um, it is certainly true that there have been some advances in deep learning models, and we can look at radiological images and say with um, at least as good and sometimes better confidence than human radiologists, whether that's cancer or not, and um, or some other kind of disease. Um, and so, are radiologists going to go away? Well, the radiologists have looked at this issue and they said, "Hey, we do 19 different tasks, and um, reviewing images is one of them." And patients in many cases are going to want a human explanation, before they're going to somebody, do surgery on their cancer tumor or whatever. So I'm not too worried about it, but I must confess, when generative AI came along a year ago or so, I was much more worried about it than I used to be. And I mentioned my co-author because he went out to a hackathon in San Francisco recently, and he ran into a guy who had just gotten his degree from Harvard in computer science. And the guy was very demoralized. He said, everything I learned these generative tools can do. It can program as well as I can, sometimes better, can translate from one language to another. It can document code. It can just do all sorts of things. So I do think it's important to learn about those capabilities and sort of try to figure out how can I add value to the work of those code generation tools. Um, Maybe someday coding will be done totally by um, machine, but I still think, sort of specifying the problem well is going to be a human skill for, foreseeable future. Yeah, well, um, I think uh, you sort of have to start to specialize a little bit. I mean, I was into AI pretty early and analytics really early. Um, and I could sort of be a generalist. But now I think, there's so many different branches of AI and so many different business functions. So I think it's important to say, okay, I'm really interested in supply chain management and how AI can help with the supply chain, or I'm really interested in there's a branch of AI called generative design. It's a little bit different from generative AI, but it's used by architects and designers to design and sort of optimize the design of new products. And I'm really interested in new product development using generative design. I'm really interested in uh, creating personalized marketing with generative AI tools, or I'm really interested in the use of generative AI to create video. I mean, it's just such a broad field now that I think you have to sort of specialize and try to figure out what is it that you find most interesting, both about business and about AI, and how the two go together. And it'll require some learning about both business and AI to come up with that combination of attributes that you find particularly interesting. But you should have a goal in mind of specializing a little bit and not saying, I'm interested in. I have had a former student whom I really like. He's now working at one of the big four accounting firms, and he's I was talking to him about his career prospects. For he wants to leave this company and go do something else related to AI. And I said, what about AI interests you? And he said, I don't know, everything. But you can't do that. You got to narrow it down a little bit these days. My pleasure.